Today's guest is Dr. Jaffe. He has a Ph.D. in psychology. He was a lecturer in the psychology department of UCLA for the better part of a decade and was the executive director and co-founder of one of the most progressive addiction retreatment facilities in the country. As a young man in his 20s, Dr. Jaffe's battle with addiction nearly landed him a decades-long prison sentence. He spent a year in rehab, a year in prison. He's going to tell you a little bit about that. And wow, just really was able to not only recreate his life and overcome that, but, go on to get a PhD in psychology at UCLA and, has been on this mission ever since. I love his message because it is such a deeper and more holistic look at addiction than just, hey, stop doing the addiction. And I'm not saying that's all that's out there, but he is looking at it much, much more complex than anyone else I've heard. And I'm just really appreciative of it. If you are dealing with addiction of any sort, even workaholism, food stuff, exercise, addiction type things, all the way to all the substances, to porn, to sex, to there's so many, gambling, shopping. I really recommend getting his book, Unhooked, Free Yourself from Addiction Forever. He has an actual shame-free step-by-step program in there to help you work through that. He has appeared on Good Morning America, CNN, many other notable venues like the Huffington Post, Dr. Drew podcast, and all of that. So he's just absolutely incredible. I am so excited for you guys to dive into this today. And even if you personally aren't struggling with an addiction, just the topic on how we treat ourselves and what's happening internally inside of us as a result of the programming that we've received throughout our lives and how to overcome it, I think will just blow you away. So let's go ahead and get into the episode. Here is Dr. Jaffe. This episode is brought to you by Peluva. So Peluva, Peluva, those are Mark Sisson's new zero drop minimalist shoe with that distinctive 5-toe design. I have been loving them. I've been a longtime fan of barefoot shoes, and I was very resistant to the little 5-toe articulation personally at first, because just being real, I thought they looked really nerdy. And I was like, oh man, yeah, I love Mark so much and I get what he's doing, but I'm not wearing those nerdy shoes. And then Brad Kearns, who's also involved with that project, was like, no, Tara, you got to try them. Tara, you got to try them. Tara, just, come on, try them. And I tried them, and I kid you not, I enjoy them so much that I actually like how they look now. Weirdly, I can tell. So like the purpose of that 5-toe articulation is so that your toes can move more dynamically. So with other barefoot shoes, like I've been a long time fan of Vivos, and I'm still a big fan of Vivos, but they have just that big toe box, right? Which is awesome. So I didn't really feel like the 5-toe articulation was necessary, to be honest. But as I've worn them, I have experienced how awesome that is. It was actually been quite surprising for me. And I wore them this morning. I wear them all the time, and I'm really, really enjoying that freedom of movement of my toes. So yeah, Brad and I have been going back and forth. I'm like, dude, I actually love them. And he offered to sponsor the podcast with Peluva and also offer you guys a 15% off code, which I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I will gladly introduce my people to Peluva shoes. So you can use code Coach Tara at peluva.com, or you can just go to peluva, peluva.com/Coach Tara, and you can get that 15% off discount. Make sure you snag some of the socks while you're there, because you're going to need the toe socks. Okay. All right, let's get into the episode. All right, Adi, I'm really excited to not only talk about addiction and a more holistic approach to understanding what's going on really on the internal world of people who are struggling with addiction, but also sharing that you've been through it. And before we started, I was sharing that, I think one of the things that helps me help people is I've walked the road. And you have really walked the road. So before we get into all of these wonderful principles that you're sharing, can you share your own path with addiction and what brought you here today?
Yeah. And, thank you for asking that. Thanks for having me on, Tara. But, the path with addiction, I would say, were the later stages of the problem, right? As I talk about oftentimes, I've just found my way to drugs as a way to fix drugs and sex and porn and things like that as a way to fix what had been wrong or what had been uncomfortable or the experiences I had as a kid that I didn't really know how to put together. It's just that everybody then focuses on the addiction because you could see that part, right? That's the part that
Right.
you could see. So I'll get to the end first, but when my story ended, as we'll tell in a little bit, I was 124 pounds. I'm about 165 sitting here in front of you right now. So think about 40 pounds lighter, you know, up for 3, 4 days at a time, kind of just destroying my body. And that was obvious. You could see that
Yeah.
about me. But in reality, at least when the drug use started, it was really functional. It really, really helped me. So I started drinking and smoking weed in high school, like I think a lot of people do when they do that stuff. I mean, I know you were in Mormonism at the time, so you probably weren't drinking and smoking weed at 14 or 15 like I was. But I was always, what I tell people is I was always really socially anxious. I always had a lot of feelings of low self-worth. I connect that now to times during elementary school, right? I have my own kids now, so I connected to in elementary school. I would come home sometimes with these massive stomach aches, like debilitating stomach aches, where I couldn't even stand up straight. And I think I just had massive anxiety when I was growing up, and I didn't really know that. Nobody gave me the terms. I was a latchkey kid. Both my parents worked a ton. My dad worked all the time. My mom would come home at about 5 or 6 p.m. every day. So after school, I would come home by myself. Later on, I would grab my sister from the bus that dropped her off. But I became really self-sufficient. And so all these anxieties and internal kind of turmoil sources were just things I learned to deal with. I didn't really know to give them a name. I didn't come from a family where people ask you how you were doing. And so I never really got to give language to this internal experience. At the age of 14, I moved. I was born in Israel, lived in the same apartment my whole life, and then moved to the States right before the age of 14. And it sounded like an adventure when it started, but then I didn't realize, all my friends, the everything from the food I knew to the language I spoke to the weather. I mean, just everything about my life changed like that. And one of the side effects was that anxiety and my feelings of low self-worth when all my lifelong friends had disappeared really came to the forefront. I was one of the foreign kids sitting in the foreign kid table in the cafeteria. I didn't have a lot of friends. Even the friends that I did have, I never really felt like I belonged. I don't know if anybody listening can relate to this, but I would always judge myself, trying to look around and see if I was enough, if people thought I was saying the right thing, wearing the right thing, looking the right way. It was really, yeah, just anxiety provoking and incredibly uncomfortable. And then at the age of 14, went to a sleepaway camp. And the story I tell in my new book, Unhooked, is we're all together at night in this cabin, boys, girls, and we're hanging out. And this kid passes out around a bottle of vodka, like a handle of vodka. And I'm 14 years old. I had a drink here and there because in Jewish traditions, there's a lot of wine passed around during meals and things of that nature. So I'd tasted alcohol before. I knew alcohol from my mom. My mom had drank, my dad didn't drink. But, it got to me. And because of all the social anxiety, I didn't even think for a second to say no. In fact, I wanted to kind of prove myself. So I had two big gulps of really warm, disgusting vodka. I could, I can still remember just the burning all the way down. And I thought that was it. I kind of just passed it off. And then within 15, 20 minutes, I felt this warmth come over me. And all of a sudden I wasn't in my head and I wasn't anxious and I wasn't worried about what other people were thinking. I could flirt with girls and talk to guys and feel like I fit in. And so I thought I've just found the cure. I didn't even know to call what I had anxiety, but I thought I found something great to help me feel better about myself. And I think a lot of us who struggle with drugs and alcohol, or really any, even behavioral addictions, food,
Mhm.
gambling, anything like that, we say, you find this thing that just takes you out of your mind, takes you out of this constant state of worry and stress. And so if after that weekend in New Jersey in a cold cabin, during the sleepaway camp, I used every opportunity with friends that I could to drink. And then 2 years later, we moved again. I got a kind of a restart of my American life. And this girl I liked that, was outside of a Perkins, if anybody knows what a Perkins is on the East Coast, but, these all night diners. And
Mm.
we were hanging out. They were all smoking cigarettes. I didn't smoke. And she passed me a joint. It was a girl I thought was cute and I liked her. So I'm obviously going to say yes to the joint. So now I added weed to the mix. And by the time I got to college 2 years later, I was drinking and smoking pretty much every day, all day. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. I had a girlfriend broke up with me. Now I went into a pretty deep state of depression, and now it was like no holds barred. I was just looking for anything that would make me not feel my feelings. And I kept running that way until I ended up moving to California. Now I had weed, I had alcohol, I found MDMA, ecstasy back in those days. And, I was a kitchen sink kind of substance user. Whatever would take me out of my feelings, I was interested in. Found meth in the middle of that process. My drug use got really, really expensive, started selling drugs in order to keep up with the drug use that I was engaging in. And 6, 7 years later, and this is how the new book opens up, I had the pleasure of the Beverly Hills Police Department SWAT team paying me a visit at my apartment and knocking on my door, and then eventually breaking in and pointing shotguns and guns at my face at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. And that was the beginning of the end.
Wow. I love
Yeah.
how you are able to tell this story because it's like it sounds very understandable, you know? It's like, okay, I could see how that could happen. I could see how that could happen. And you're hitting on something so critical that I see with from binge eating to
Mm,
alcohol to, maybe stimulant addictions and all these things is this belief
sure.
like this is making my life better in the moment. I feel better. This is amazing. Life with the addiction better. You can, workaholism, which you talk about a lot, like all of
Oh
us,
yeah.
like this is making my life better. Even fitness addiction when it's taken too far, which I fell into at
Yeah.
first because I was proving that I was good enough,
Mm,
And I heard you say on the Model Health Show something that reminded me of what I say a lot. I always like tell my clients, I'm like, your drinking issue, this is a symptom of the problem, not the
yeah.
problem. So what's the problem? And you said it's a solution you found to the problem. And you've prefaced this well, like this is the addiction thing was just like we said, a solution you found, a symptom of a
Yeah.
deeper problem. And I would really love to start hitting on this because I've definitely found the
Yeah.
same
Please.
and working with clients on different, food addictions and all of this.
Sure.
I know you're not a big label guy on like, but I think I heard you hint at in a TED talk, I am not ADHD. I am not an
Yeah.
addict or whatever. So is there somewhere in there that you were at some point given like an ADHD or do you connect to that type of neurology? I'm curious on that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great question. So I was diagnosed with ADHD in college and then again in grad school.
Okay.
I actually literally had this conversation. This is a weird coincidence, but I just had this conversation at a work dinner last night with a
Oh, wow.
mom, a couple. The dad works in the company that I consult for, but they were talking about one of their kids being neurodivergent. And I think the realities, so I was always really book smart. I was always really good at academics, but always incredibly disorganized, always talking out of turn, always jumping out of my seat to answer a question or say something because I had a thought in my head and I couldn't stop it coming out of my mouth, right? And so pretty classic ADHD like symptoms. And I was talking to this guy in this company, and I was saying, look, he's incredibly smart. I mean, genius level smart. And I was saying, were there any times in school when you were really bored? I mean, the material was just too simple. It was too easy. Plus, you're sitting in this one chair for hours every day as a kid, right? You're like 8 years old, 10 years old. Were there ever times when in the middle of that you found yourself just zoning out or doing doodling or talking out of turn? And he said, of course, yes. And I said, I think the problem is we live more and more in a society that tries to fit everybody into boxes.
Yeah.
And we're different. We're all different people. And so neurodivergent, all that really means, like if you literally break apart the word neurodivergent, it means that your neurology is divergent. But from whom? Like what is divergent from what? And
Right.
so I wanted to write this book for years, and then Gabor Mate beat me to it. The Myth of Normal is
Yeah.
this book that he wrote recently, and I tell all my clients this all the time. Normal is a myth. Normal does not exist, and there are two pieces of it that I want to hit on to speak to this ADHD component that you mentioned. First of all, what we consider normal is like an amalgamation. It's the average of everybody else, right? But nobody is really normal. Just like in many situations, average height is not, if let's say the average height, I'm just over 5'9". So let's say the average height for a man is 5'9". Are there people who are 5'9"? Sure. But like, does being 5'10" make you abnormally tall? Or is it 6? Is it 5'7" when you're abnormally short, right? You start having to play with gray areas. And it's not like anybody shoots. That's the first point. Average is kind of just this
Mhm.
normal thing that we created. But then the next piece is I've never met anybody, and I do mean anybody, who says, well, I just want to be normal, other than when they're told that they are abnormal in a way that hurts them
Right.
functioning in the world, right? So I think the people we look up to the most in the world, and that can be on the coaching front, right? So take the David Goggins, take the like these super high achieving men, all the way to the Brene Browns and the Mel Robinson like world. So that's in the coaching world. But then go to athletes, right? Go to artists, go to scientists, go to politicians, writers, pick anybody that you really look up to. Are they normal? I don't think they're normal. I think
Yeah.
not a single one of them is normal. And it's actually in the uniqueness, in the divergence. The divergence is what makes them special. So I think, yes, by classic symptoms, I'm really disorganized.
Mhm.
I used to joke I was the only drug dealer I knew with a personal assistant because I couldn't pay bills. I had all the money. I had it sitting there in cash. I couldn't. My car got impounded, literally. Like I'm talking like a Nissan Sentra or something that I had, and it got impounded. I had 50 times the money for the last 3 months of payment in that same studio where the car got impounded from. I just never paid the freaking bill. So I've always been really, really disorganized. Another thing that is a symptom of ADHD is fleeting thoughts. Like you connect a lot of
Yeah.
different dots, they kind of fly around. That's been there for me my whole life. When I
Mhm.
was a kid in school, I would talk out of turn all the time. Weirdly, now my career is primarily speaking. Like that's
Yeah.
70% of what I do for work now is talking. So, yes, I was diagnosed with ADHD. What I've learned now to as a personal perspective, as a frame for that is there are things that make my brain unique and that makes
Mhm.
it qualified to do certain things and completely disqualified to do others. You do not want me organizing your taxes. You don't want me organizing your room, even to be perfectly frank. But if you've got a lot of different balls in the air and you're trying to figure out how to make them all fit together and how to create a life, I'm probably really good at that for you.
Thank you for sharing that. I completely see it that way. And I've never like tried to get a diagnosis, but I've been told by, colleagues, they're like, Tara, you would get one. And my son, who's 17, would for sure. I mean, it's just like quintessential. And the reason I bring it up is because I've noticed in my son, they talk about the rejection sensitivity
Mm,
dysphoria that ADHD people tend to have or whatever, right?
sure.
And I have noticed in him, like he's brilliant. He's, he can be insanely driven and talented at anything that interests him. He's just such an awesome kid. And that sensitivity is there and like it's like a hypersensitivity that also allows him to be freaky intelligent and outside of the box and find solutions or whatever. But that emotional sensitivity I've noticed, especially for boys, because, there's still
Mm,
that whole like, we got to be tough and we got to be a man and we got to hold it
macho,
all
yeah.
in kind of that still exists even now. Like, that's still happening to
Sure.
little boys globally right now. We haven't gotten that far
Yeah.
on that. And I can see how that has led, I mean, kudos to him. He's like reading Four Agreements, like he's read it like 7 times. He
Right.
meditates, those breath work, but
Yeah.
I see it in him, I see that like it really hurts. And it did for a while in his early teenage years really get to him this. And I think, by the way, like it's developmental also. But I think if you have
Sure.
that high sensitivity and then you're basically getting these little messages of you're not good enough, you don't measure up, we don't like you, we don't approve of you, stop being bad, all of that, it's going to really, really negatively impact a sensitive person's self-esteem and how they see themselves, like possibly even a little more when you're highly sensitive like that. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could, because this is where we're going to go straight into the meat and the potatoes of this.
Yeah, sure, sure.
I heard you talk about how, and you've kind of mentioned here how you started to internalize that behavior. You're looking out, do other people like me? Am I good enough? And that's creating this massive social anxiety, which then
Yeah.
of course, you get reprieve from when you jack up your serotonin to insane levels, right? All the way to MDMA. It's just like, let's go all the way with this baby.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah,
Make me
definitely.
feel better. And so I would love to get, especially you had a PhD in psychology and you've been doing this with thousands of people and this is your life's work. Can you help us understand what's going on
Mm.
really underneath the addiction? What is causing people to feel like they need something to feel better all the time?
Y- Yeah, yeah. So I'll start with where you kind of ended up with in terms of psychology, right? So I talk about this in the book for sure. There's there's one of the really funny things about our brains is our brains choose what to pay attention to based on what we believe is important.
Mhm.
Um, we have a ton of cognitive biases that you learn about over time. And the thing that I try to get a lot of people to understand, I write about in the book, I talk about it with the thousands of clients that I work with, is we have the false notion early on, unless we learn this, and it sounds like your son is learning this through books like the Four Agreements and whoever taught him meditation, etc. Is we have this false sense that what we believe is important is truly what's important, like that it is objectively the truth, right? So
Yeah.
the looks people give us, the specific comments they have, by the way, the semantic meaning we give to what they say, right? If somebody says to me something like, um, wow, I can't believe you just said that. That is an objectively hard to interpret sentence. But if I'm in a
Yeah.
bad frame and I have negative self-esteem, I may think that what they mean by that is that what I said was out of touch or inappropriate. They could have said, they could have meant in the exact same sentence and sitting in the exact same room, wow, that was really brave of you to say that or admit it, right?
Mhm.
My reaction internally to both of those semantic meanings could be completely different. But if I don't learn to question,
Mhm.
if I don't learn to have curiosity, if I don't learn to be, I'll say brave enough, but maybe more conscious enough of my bias to say, hey, what did you mean by that? What I heard you mean was that was a really stupid thing to say. Is that what you meant? I don't know. We
Yeah.
start having curiosity. We start understanding that our frame and other people's frame is not the same. And if you take your son or you take my example from the stories I told earlier, the reality is I'm standing there. Let's say I would be talking to you and be in reality we're not on Zoom and there's somebody standing right here to our right. My brain still to this day will check constantly their facial expressions and how are they looking at you? How are they looking at me? I am enamored by people who can really, really focus in a conversation. You know these people, right? They look you
Yes.
straight in the eyes
Yes.
and they do not look away. My brain is all over the place as I'm looking. And so what I've learned is to question my own frame, my own perspective, my own reality. And that is actually one of the things that has helped me the most. So there are a ton of cognitive biases. I'll name a couple of them just for people to have a frame in case they haven't heard them before. So one of the big ones that everybody talks about is confirmation bias. I mentioned before, your brain has an understanding of what is important to pay attention to and what is not. And so that is based on your internal beliefs, right? So let's say one of your beliefs is what other people think of me is really, really important. Then you will constantly pay attention to what other people believe or think about you because that's an important thing. What does that mean? You may pay attention to their facial expressions, their body language, the tone of their words, et cetera, as they talk to you, right? You are giving importance. And in giving importance by belief, you give importance by attention. So you can only attend to so many things at any given point in time. You are directing a lot of your attention at those things that I just named in order to judge what you think is important. But that is based on your belief of what is important. And so if you can change that alone, your brain will shift what it looks like. There are a ton of studies. There's one that I mentioned in the book that I would urge people. If you look up, let's say, like I think one of the YouTube searches that will get you this, some like black white basketball passes experiment. I don't want to
Okay.
give away what the actual experiment is, but there's a video, and if people just pause this right now and go look at the video or look at this after, it's a video that shows you that if I tell you to pay attention to something in the environment, your
Mm.
brain is so good at paying attention only to what you believe is important, you will miss other things that are really, really crucial. And we do this all the time. There were experiments that have done. I've actually participated, or I've worked with scientists who've done this kind of experiment. It's called change blindness. If you put somebody in a driving simulator and you have them drive a car in a simulator, you can do insane things to the background images in that simulator, and people will never notice. And I'm talking things like you can drive and entire buildings in front of you can disappear, and you will have no recollection when we test it later that any
Wow.
buildings disappeared, any new buildings appeared. People will pop in and out of the scene, trees in and out. And the reason is all we have to do is something like, let's say there's a crosswalk. We have to put in the simulator somebody passing the crosswalk. Your brain immediately goes to this person. Three buildings can disappear while that person passes by. You will
Right.
not know it. And the
Right.
reason I think I talk about this in the book a lot, I like using physical examples for psychological phenomenon because we're so bad at understanding how subjective we are that we need physical examples. And
Mhm.
so confirmation bias is one thing. What I believe is important was what I pay attention to, everything else disappears. Anchoring bias is another huge one. You talked about Mormonism, right? So you came from the church. Um, whether you like it or not, whether you think it's relevant now or not, whether you still believe it or not, the initial beliefs you got serve as an anchor. They serve as the starting point for all future endeavors. So, how your parents looked at morality, what food was good and bad, um, what jobs were considered appropriate and not, what subjects in school, what people were attractive and not. I mean, almost anything in life that you think of that you started out developing opinions for based on your cultural and environmental influence early on, they become anchors. You can move away from that anchor, but that still becomes your starting point. Now, if you're born in that church and I'm born in Israel in Judaism, or somebody's born in Africa in the middle of a Maasai tribe, or in South America, our anchors are completely different.
Mhm.
And so what you choose to pay attention to is different. The reason I think this is really, really important, this is to me where multiculturalism, the stuff that your son is doing, for instance, right now, getting exposure to as much information that is as far from your anchors as possible is it's almost like our job. You have to get yourself exposed to things that make you really uncomfortable and are completely different than your version of normal, because that's the only way that you will ever run across a belief, a perspective, or a frame of mind for life that will make you go, wait, what if I'm wrong? What if the way I look at life is wrong? And I'm going to turn a question back to you. You left Mormonism, right? You left the church. And so how many times from the moment you started thinking that you may want to leave the church until, let's say, this moment, have you dealt with having this realization, oh my gosh, I took on this belief fully
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just thought that it was truth, and now I have to overwrite it and replace it with something completely different?
It's made me almost obsessed with being wrong because my life, for me personally, got so much better when I found out I was wrong about literally that was the whole lens I saw life through. Like I had to, it fractured my entire sense of reality. I don't know what I think about anything anymore. Whoa, like so much repatterning. And it now, when I'm faced with like, I'm feeling really right about something and I got it figured out, I'm like, nah, I'm totally open to
Mhm.
finding out this is all just not I'm not even close to what I think happiness is because I've experienced that at such a profound level already. Yeah. So I like finding
I
out
think
I
it
was
was,
wrong.
I think it was Aristotle. I think it was Aristotle. I may be misattributing this, but who said the more I know, the more I know I don't. The more I know I don't know enough, or I don't know everything. And it's like another psychological effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect, that the less you know about things, the smarter you think you are about them because you don't even
Yeah.
have a frame of reference. And
Yeah.
so that's actually why I love these conversations, because people think in addiction, we talked about addiction. If somebody's addicted to food and sugar,
Yeah.
we call them a food addict as if their problem is food. If they have an alcohol problem, we have a term for them, an alcoholic, as if alcohol is their problem. Meth addict, cocaine addict, sex addict. That is always wrong. Yes, they may be psychologically dependent. They may have a habit of using that thing. But if you keep looking at the symptom, you're going to miss the whole problem.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I had a client once that wanted to get off Adderall, and I was like, "Well, bro, I'm not really qualified for that, but I'm happy to walk you through it on the mindset part of things, just
Yeah.
diving into this with you." And my simple question was, what parts of your day make you think, ooh, I need Adderall for this? That's where the problem is.
Yeah.
You're trying to
Yeah.
force yourself into it.
Yeah. And when do you go to yourself as an adjunct to that? Like, when do you go to yourself, if I had Adderall, this would be better? Or I can't do this without Adderall.
Yeah.
Like that's when, because it's the problem then is more the I can't do this.
Right.
Then are you trying to do something that you shouldn't be doing? Are you speaking down to yourself in terms of your skills? Is there something else you need to learn to do better so that you can do it without the supplement? Like
Hmm.
those are really the questions you should be asking yourself. I like to always say it to my clients too. Beware of shortcuts. Like when you discover a really good shortcut in life, stop,
Mm.
because odds are it's not really a shortcut. I'm now 48 years old. I haven't found many long-term functional shortcuts. Normally, you end up hitting a brick wall at some point and realize that shortcut got you to a dead end.
Mm. So, okay, coming back to kind of these root causes, right? So, addiction's the symptom or the solution. We think it's the solution to all our problems is making my life
Yeah.
so much better. Um, for you, what would you, if you had to summarize like what the actual problem was, what would you say?
Um, I put these in categories, so I'll just line up the categories first, and I can go through mine.
Sure.
Um, the ways we think about ourselves,
Yeah.
the way we see other people,
Mm.
our belief about the world at large,
Yeah.
the way we look at asking for help, the way we look at failure, and the way we look at what it means to be successful. So
Wow.
those are
So,
kind of six different categories,
yeah.
and I can go through mine if it helps as an
Or
example.
you can, talk generally since you've worked with so many people or, flux between the two, whatever flows.
Yeah. So I talked. I had a very um, negative sense of self. I never thought I was enough. That
Right.
came out of perfectionism. I actually didn't realize how many people that deal with addiction are perfectionists until I started working with hundreds and hundreds of them. People have this misjudgment that those who struggle with addiction don't care about anything. It's the opposite. We care too much. We care so much that every slight, and this goes back to failure, every slight move outside of what seemed perfect to us hurts our being so badly that we need to cover up the negative emotion. So
Yeah.
any sense of imperfection in terms of self, or negative kind of connotation about our worth, our value, how lovable we are, etc. When it
Mhm.
comes to other people, I think a lot of times people struggle with the belief that others are not helpful. Others are
Mm.
that you're isolated, that nobody really cares. Not because
Mm.
even just because of you, just because the nature of people, that people are selfish and will not be there for you when you need them is another piece that goes along with the asking for help, because a lot of people believe that asking for help shows weakness.
Right.
And so I for many many years, if there was anything that I didn't know how to do or anything I didn't feel good enough about, I I didn't believe that asking for help was even an option, because I thought that asking for help would reveal to everybody else that I was a failure, where in
Right.
reality it's the exact opposite, right? Everything great in the world was always achieved by people who sought help and got help, and had mentors and advisors, etc. Um, I talked about the world at large. I used to have this foreboding sense, and so many of my clients, when I first started dealing with them, had a sense that the world is a dark, dark
Mhm.
place, and that it's always going to be dark. It's that whole, you're born alone, you die alone, nobody's here for that kind of
Mhm.
notion about how you're going to function through the world. So that's another one. Failure. A lot of us, this goes back to that perfectionism piece to some extent, but a lot of us have a sense that, again, failure is the worst thing that can happen to you. So that, and you fail, none of us are perfect, so you're always going to fail. And so if every failure makes you feel like, not like you failed at a task, but rather like you are a failure, that's a huge piece of the problem. And what I have to do with many of my clients is say, look, the path to every success is lined with many many failures, and you have to actually get comfortable. This is a phrase a lot of coaches I know use as well, but you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and one of those is failing. You just have to be willing to accept that no matter what it is you're going to try at, even if you're going to become a master at it, you're going to achieve mastery at some point. In order to achieve that mastery, you have to fail repeatedly and just learn from those experiences.
Right. Yeah. I don't really resonate with failure. It's learning. But I can see how, because your self-worth is tied to it. It's all performance. Everything I'm hearing from you, it's
Yes.
like it's a very performance-based way of looking at self-worth through the eyes of others, through your own perfectness. Hide, don't let anybody know that you're not perfect, because it's all there. There's just low self-worth and poor treatment of self, guaranteed, which is not even, it's totally from adults, caregivers, etc. Right? That's now
The
being in.
thing that's the reality is that it's so often projected onto us from others,
Right.
right? But as a child, you just take it on.
Right. Just seems
You
like
don't
how.
know better.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
so sorry I interrupted the little ADHD moment. Where were you at? The dark world, and then what was after
So we
that?
had Dark World. We had the failure piece
Failure.
that that went along with asking for help, and then one of the things that is something I'm actually this is almost like a new addition that puts some of these together and flips it on its head, like essentially does the negative version of everything else was bad. How you look at success is another big metric.
Okay.
I started working with clients a lot now and measuring. Are you measuring your success primarily by external measures, like things you can show others? Or is there a sense, a relational sense, like the people in your life and what you feel like in the morning? Those aspects of self
Mm,
and measuring your achievements. Because, when I started out, I was a graduate student. I was working with, whoever was in the clinics I was working at or the treatment centers. But as I kept working higher and higher up the ladder, and I work with ultra high net worth individuals or people who are really, really successful, it's hard. It was hard originally to look, like you mentioned, to look at somebody who's uber successful and try to figure out how could their self-concept be so far from what it looks like to everybody else on the outside, right? And that could be a world famous musician, right? Where literally millions of people believe that they love him, her, and come to shows and laud them and are obsessed. How could and you work with somebody like this and you think to yourself, okay, I understand why I may, and this is again a subjective view, but I could understand why I would have a problem with self-esteem. I've got the 4, 5, 7 friends I've got. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. I have success, but it's moderate, blah, I have my story of it. But I would initially, 10, 12 years ago when I started working with some of these people, I would ask, how did they I had to bridge that gap. How can you have millions of fans and feel like a failure at the same time? And what I understood is it's back to that self-judgment. But those people, they believe that they can measure how good they are and how good their measure their success in life by external measures, and nothing will ever fill that. There's no amount of money, no number of fans, no number of platinum hits or
yeah.
employees in your global Fortune 50 firm that will fill a void if you
Yeah.
don't find internal ways to measure your success.
Yeah. You're getting me right on the heels of a really powerful transformation healing retreat. I only do one a year. We just came back from so much
Mm.
powerful energy
Oh,
and
nice.
so much of the work that we were doing. And it is, I already know, I see it in my daily work, but being around 24 people at this retreat and, asking them to make a list of, I asked them to make a list of 13 things they ever felt were shameful or unlikable or unlovable about themselves that they were ready to deal with and communicate to someone across from them. And they're just scribbling away, scribbling away, scribbling away. Okay. And then they're all crying and they're like, thanks, Tara, for the trauma speed dating. That's what one of them called it, trauma, because they're like going down these lines. And then I asked him to do, I'm like, I'm not going to leave you like this. Okay, guys. And to your point with Brene Brown, right? She has this quote I love. I'm paraphrasing, but you need three things in a petri dish to have shame grow exponentially: secrecy,
Mm.
silence, and judgment. But if you throw empathy on that, it can't survive. The shame can't survive. So we were kind of doing an exercise based off that kind of thinking. And then I asked them to make a list of 13 things that are just great qualities about themselves. And one of our beautiful attendees said, "What if you don't have any?" And then I was like, "You get your thinking cap on, girlfriend. You get your thinking
Mm.
cap on. I'll come help you if you need." And she's just such a beautiful soul. So it's just like, but I just watched them sit there like wrecked, trying so hard. Many of them, and these are successful people, they're doing well in
Sure.
life, but I was just like, I mean, I already know it, but like just to see it in person like that in a group, how tough it was for them to find, 3 or 4 good, likable, lovable qualities about themselves. You know, it's
Mm,
it's a big problem. It's a huge problem
huge,
still to this day,
huge.
like, because you're a Gen X, you're latchkey kid, and
Yeah.
that's how the parenting was big time back then, and then it's still to this day, it's kinda like, let me try to use shame and guilt as a behavior change method, right? Let me make you feel
Mm,
really bad about yourself if you aren't how I want you to be, and let me give you lots of praise if you are, and it's self-abandonment central, and I think you're hitting on, even bigger than way bigger, I know you know that, but way bigger than just addiction, which it will lead to, like, addiction to what other people think of me,
well,
addiction.
why do people develop a workaholism, right? Like
Exactly.
because they think to themselves, if I get the title, if I get the job, if I get the $1 million, if I get the
Yeah.
$15 million house, if I get the
Mhm.
yacht, if I get the helicopter that lands on the yacht, if I get the spaceship, if you get my drift, then at some point, I'm going to feel like I got where I needed to get. And it's BS. You never
Yes.
get there. You
Yep.
will never get there based on those metrics. Now, by the way, I just want to qualify, you can have a yacht and be really happy. I'm not
Yeah.
saying having a
Yes.
yacht is a problem. It's just if you're looking for it to fulfill you, it will never do the job. Because to speak to what you mentioned in terms of the style of parenting, I think there's actually an insidious undertone to it beyond um, parenting. I think many of us have that belief that we need to be closer to perfect and we project that onto others. And
Yeah.
so even in our kids, I think we do it because we want them to succeed more. We want them to be better. But in that, oftentimes we forego what's already good about them. So if you said, and by the way, I have 3 kids. I struggle with this with my own kids, just so everybody can hear me
Yeah.
well. Just because I know some of this stuff does not mean the biases do not affect me every single day of my own life. I have to fight through this myself. But I can have a kid, my middle child, like gorgeous, super athletic, incredibly capable, funny, fun to be around. Everybody loves him when they first meet him, and also really insecure, can't follow through on anything. Uh, if he doesn't get his way, that sensitivity you talked about, if he doesn't get his way, it becomes an epic battle of right versus wrong in the universe. Easily distractible, right? Like so, there's the good and the challenging all in one, and it's a parent's challenge to, as you're trying to help them understand how to correct highly disrespectful when he feels like he's not getting his way, right? All that's like a big boundary for me. I'm like, you don't get to speak to adults the way you're trying to do it right now. So how do I teach him those lessons while not negating or devaluing all the things that are already good about
Right.
him? That's a constant challenge. And I think you're right that many, many times, there's a story I use about my dad. I came home with a 97 on a math test in like fourth grade. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like high school or college or anything. 97. And the first words out of my dad's mouth was, where'd you miss the 3 points? Instead of the 97. And,
Yeah.
and the message, whether he meant it or not, is almost irrelevant. The message in my head was the only acceptable grade to bring home is 100. Did I bring home hundreds? Sure, every once in a while, but not always. So even if 20% of my grades were perfect, the other 80 felt like failures. Like I could come home with an A minus, a 90 or a 91 or an 89, and I would feel like I failed because I didn't have 100. And I think a lot of us grow up with that gap, this black and white notion of life. And what I've tried to do now for myself and my clients is we live in gray. Black and white exist in the far edges of almost any continuum. We have to learn to be comfortable in the middle ground.
Mhm. You're making me think of, like, my parents were very dysfunctional in a lot of ways and very amazing and beautiful, and I'm so grateful
Mm,
for other aspects of them. My mom, undiagnosed schizophrenia for sure. My dad,
mm,
uh, high functioning autism, what we used to call Asperger's, like quintessential
sure.
textbook case, right? And so they had a lot of their own challenges in life, even in their own psyches, just trying to, 5 kids, divorced. Um, but I think because of that, my mom always said, "I don't really care what kind of grades you get. as long as you're respectful to your teachers, your conduct and how you're respecting and showing up, but that matters to me. I don't care. I don't care about your grades at all. She told us all that. I'm youngest of 5. Little me, honor society president, Spanish honor society president, and all of the, because and like anytime I would have a good grade, she would just go, "Wow, Tara, I don't know how you do it. That's great." Like, just no, she
Yeah.
could care less. They could have been D's.
Mm.
Do you need anything? Or they could have been straight A's. Like, wow, like there was no
Yeah,
metric
yeah.
on me because of that. And I think it created a lot of freedom. Now, granted, there's plenty of trauma and all that kind of stuff too.
Sure.
But it helped me see, the gift that it is to not place these high expectations. I didn't really feel like, besides being Mormon, I didn't feel like my parents had any expectations on me, really. That
Mm.
not to make me a good enough person for them. That didn't
Got it.
exist in their psyches, you know? They were
Sure.
not judgmental people. They didn't judge. I never can recall a time of hearing any of them, either of them talk bad about anyone ever. Like they kind of thought
Mm.
everybody was better than them. Wow, she's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, they're amazing.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it just helped me see, like, I didn't understand really, when people were like so the comparison thing. I kind of mimicked my parents, like, I want to be like that.
Of
That's
course.
amazing. Like, and so,
Of course.
you know,
And how great is that as an
hmm
example? How
yeah,
great is that as an example, right? Because there are people listening right now for whom my story sounds foreign and yours
yeah,
sounds familiar, and then vice versa, and everything in between. And
yeah,
I think the message that I always hope to impart on people is let's spend less time wishing our past was different,
yeah.
because unless you have a time machine, that ship has passed, that that train has
Yep,
left the station. You're here now. And
yeah,
there were things you had no impact over or no responsibility over, no control around when you were younger, and now you're an adult. So
yeah.
you're still subject to the same rules, like your past will impact you. But you can start now.
Mhm.
You can start now identifying, okay, here's where I was born. I call it in my book, I call it the eat cycle. I kind of joke, you have to pay attention to what you put in your body and what you eat physically in order to be healthy.
Nice.
You also have to pay attention to what you eat psychologically. So that's explore, accept, transform. Exploration is how did I get here? Right. So that's like,
Okay.
oh, my mom was an undiagnosed schizophrenic. Here's the good for it. Here's the bad. Here's the weird. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
That's exploration. I get it. Now, the next step is acceptance, because a lot of people find that, and I'm sure you went
Mhm.
through this at some point, a lot of people find out those factors, and the shame and the judgment and all that stuff starts seeping in because they go, oh my
Mm.
God, what does that mean about me? What does it mean about my parents?
Mhm.
All the trauma I went through, I'm now
Right.
damaged, right? We start using
Oh,
this languaging around
right.
ourselves. Hold on. You're not damaged. Your brain did exactly what it was supposed to do back then. It adjusted to the environment you were born in. Not
Mhm.
damaged,
Yeah.
but it learned what it learned. So it was anchored. So now acceptance is the next piece. Got it. My brain did what it's supposed to do, even if I'm neurodivergent, right? Like whatever it did what it was supposed to do given its capacity and resources. And now I'm here. Acceptance is that I'm whole as I am.
Mm,
That doesn't mean
yes.
I can't work to change. That
Right.
doesn't mean I can't want something different, but I am me right now.
Right.
And it's from that place, from a grounded, stable place of acceptance, as you mentioned, letting go of as much shame and judgment internally as you can, that we get to go, all right, now, because I'll say this, if you're acting out of judgment and shame, you may be reacting. You may be trying to go against what you had as a child, even though that's not really what you want. It is not really what's serving you, because you're being reactive to the past. But once you come to acceptance, you say, okay, this is my baseline now. What do I want? Well, I learned that grades were not really important, but performance academically is really important to me now as I look. I do want to get a PhD. I do want to get a master's. I do want to become a lawyer. Okay, great. But I'm making that decision from this grounded new place, now from the
Mhm.
judgment and the expectations or lack thereof
Right.
of my parents. Then
Right.
comes transformation. So explore, accept, transform. I don't know that I keep fighting with this next sentence in my life and my work. I don't know that you can do anything you want on the face of the planet, but you can do a heck of a lot more than you believe once you
Yeah.
put some work and some elbow grease into it, and
Yeah.
are willing to spend enough time learning how to do something, right? And I'm talking going to space. I'm talking becoming the best gardener in the universe. I'm talking becoming a race car driver, being a really good painter, a
Yeah.
juggler, or like a creative writer. Like it doesn't,
Yeah.
it almost doesn't matter where you want to go and when you're starting right now. What matters is how much work are you willing to do in between. And if you can't come from a place of acceptance, and I believe also if you haven't explored and don't understand what brought you to this moment, then you're playing with your hands behind your back a little bit. You're kind of, you know, searching in the dark for the right job, the right
Hmm.
career, the right hobby, or the right relationship,
Yeah.
right? You just haven't done the work to understand
Mhm.
yourself and accept yourself enough.
Let me ask you this on this note, because this is something that admittedly, I'm like, I must not. I was just telling my son this the other night. I'm like, I don't feel like I have figured out the right way to have this hit because I get so much resistance on it. And it's kind of
Hmm.
what you just hit on is that I find that people are so used to only using self-criticism, self-judgment, just being horrifically cruel to themselves as a motivator to change, that when I start talking about self-love, they're like, get out of here. Get out of here with that." Like, because they immediately jump to, well, if I love and accept myself as I am, then I'm just going to stay like this forever and I can't have that happen. So screw you and your self-love stuff. And I'm, gently and trying to show them like, no, no, no. Okay. So if you love your kid, right? You love your kid and your kid's shoes are falling apart. Are you like, no, I love you. I love you. And you're perfect the way you are. Just like that. No, you're going to help them get some new shoes. If your kid is, wanting to go after something, you're not gonna be like, no, you're perfect the way you are. Don't go after your dance goals. Don't go after your football career. Nope, nope, nope.
Right.
That's not
Right.
love. Love is
Yeah.
encouragement, support, investment, putting action in.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, do you get a lot of resistance on this?
Uh, yeah, so I do get resistance on the self-love piece. I'll tell you how I've resolved it as a
Yeah,
repeating kind of
please.
framework that I use with my clients. So I'm borrowing Einstein had this phrase that the sign of true intelligence is being able to hold two opposing ideas at the same time.
Mm,
And so I love that quote and I find it true in a lot of places. And here's my solution to the
mm.
quandary that you just presented for people. So what I tell people is your job in life is to do two things that seem completely opposing to one another at the same time. Number
Mm,
one, fully accept yourself as you are right now. And number two, identify, believe, plan for, and put in the work to get where you want to
nice,
go next. You
nice.
have to be able to do both
Yep.
because if all you do is accept yourself, you'll be stagnant.
Right.
And in stagnation, unfortunately, it's not even that you stay the same, you regress. Because if you think about it, let's say your kid with the shoes, right? If you don't get your kid new shoes in a year, those shoes are worse. They're not at the same level that they are even in
Yeah.
right now, right? Things get worse if you don't put work into them. There's a minimum amount of work you have to put into things just to keep the status quo. So if you just accept
Yeah.
everything as it is right now, it's actually going to deteriorate and you're going to get worse and worse and worse. If you only judge yourself based on whether you hit your goals, you will never ever be happy
Yep.
because you're never going to reach your goals. Surprise to anybody listening right now who hasn't figured this out about life yet. The moment you reach your goal, the moment you do it, it's not going to be enough anymore and you need a new set
Yep.
of goals. So if you always judge yourself by where you're going, you will never be happy. If you only accept yourself as you are, you will never change and you will never strive and you will never grow. You have to be willing to accept both. And that's a
Beautiful.
difficult task for a lot of people, but I found it's a huge unlock the moment you can do it because there's
Yeah.
no judgment about where I am, but I'm not
Right.
accepting it as everything I can be.
Exactly. And then you have that self-supportive action is like, hey, you don't have to do any of this stuff. What would you like to do? And let me support you along that path. Which
Yeah.
obviously, I mean, I can't recommend enough for people to read your book. And by the way, you have another book, Abstinent. What is the name of that book? Abstinence is
The
not the crime.
abstinence myth.
The
Yeah, the
abstinence myth.
abstinence myth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
that was a precursor to Unhooked. It's a really short book. It's like 125
Okay.
pages. Um, but I mean, the abstinence myth, given everything we've talked about now, is simple. Like quitting alcohol is not the only solution to your problem. Stop judging whether you're doing well on your drinking just based on whether you quit alcohol or not. It's not a good metric. I know a lot of people who've been sober for 30 years and they're freaking miserable. Um,
Mm.
I'm not saying it's not a good part of it, but the whole point is stop
Right.
judging your success in recovery by whether you quit or not.
Okay. Beautiful. And so then Unhooked is your like your book, your
Unhooked
real
is the method on how to get there. And it, look, it came out of Tara, it came out of literally probably if you include talks in groups, thousands of people, but if you talk one-on-one clients, hundreds and hundreds of clients. And I'm sure the same as yours. I would work with these clients and I would try to figure out how to explain their problems to them. Because to me, it was clear. I could look at the client, listen to their life stories, talk to them for 20, not 20 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, and go, okay, I got it, but they wouldn't get it. And so I had to try to break it down. And the model that I came up with, it's what I call kind of like my behavioral model, is essentially cognitive behavioral therapy with some acceptance and commitment therapy, and then trauma informed kind of somatic components.
nice.
And
Nice.
so the question is just how do I go from walking around thinking everything is fine 8 o'clock in the morning when I leave my house to acting like a complete fool at 9 p.m. Like, I don't understand how that bridge happened. And so, what
Yeah.
I built is just a way for them to break down any specific
Nice.
event so they can identify, they go, oh crap, when that person said the thing in the email, I didn't give it any credence, but I interpret it
Mm,
in this certain way. And it made me have
mm,
an internal panic attack that I tried to
mm.
hide from all day because I thought asking from other
Yes.
people for help is not okay. And so then when I
Mm,
got home at 4 o'clock, I had two drinks just to like quiet that panic.
wow.
But then I had to keep drinking all day to get my like that's just a really simple example, but I would have them break it down. They think it's because they drank a drink at 4 o'clock. I'm like, no, 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 no. It's because you misunderstood the email at 11 is the
Yes.
problem. And they just
Yes.
they would detach them so much because the point of why do we sit around and eat a tub of ice cream at 8 p.m. When somebody broke up with us? Because of the emotional pain.
Right.
We use it to not deal with the discomfort. And
Yeah.
what I'm telling, I'm sure you do the exact same thing with your clients. But then I walk in, I'm like, no, 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 hold on. All we have to do is deal with the discomfort. Like we need to sit in that discomfort like there's a jacuzzi or maybe like a cold plunge or something, right? Like let's get really comfortable with how shitty it feels. Sorry, how crappy it
Oh, you're good.
feels
You're good.
to um to be dumped. Let's just sit in that.
Right.
What
Right.
are the fears? I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. Nobody's ever going to love me. I'm a loser, and I'm actually not good enough for anybody to love me. My parents were right where they told me I was going to end up alone. Like those thoughts are real thoughts in your head that are brought in from all your early experiences. We need to understand them and love them and accept them,
Yes.
not
Yes.
run away from them.
Yep. There's this belief we should never feel bad, right? They changed if you're happy and you know it when my kids were little to all the verses were if you're happy and you know it. Happy, happy. I was like, what is going on?
I
We
love
have
it.
those
Not even
emotions
if
for a
you're happy and
reason.
like you're happy and you know it. It's
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
Lego. What's that Lego movie? Everything is awesome. Like that
Yeah.
that in the Lego movie, there's that song. It's like,
Like a movie so good. No
yeah,
negativity of any kind.
ever. Why would you have it? It feels bad. Why would I experience it? Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Well, I am sure I will be using your book as a resource and probably sending a lot of clients this podcast first as a
Mm,
resource and then using your book with them. So thank you. Like, I just have to give you, I know you've been on a million interviews and you've been doing this like crazy, but like, just straight from my heart, like, thank you for doing what you did.
mm,
And like, being able to pull yourself out of that and then following your intuitively guided path all the way to a
thank you.
PhD and then doing all this work and doing like just laboring, writing the books, coming on the podcast, like all the little business stuff you have to do on the back end and all this stuff. Like, and it's maybe a little bit of that ADHD because it's kind of fun, it's stimulating, but but it's so
It's
much for
it's a
your
little bit
heart.
of that. It's a little bit of that, and I probably don't have to
Soul.
say this to you, but it's like every single person that sends you an email or writes you a message that, hey, I'm like I get emotional just thinking about it, right? Like
Yep.
if my story helps one person, then it was worth
Yep.
doing it. And
Yep.
so we got to keep going because
Yeah. Yeah.
there's more people that need help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm grateful. It's seen, it's appreciated, it's special. It's, you're on a unique mission and I'm just grateful that we were able to do this
Thank you.
today and that I can introduce my people to you and just, yeah, say thank you. So,
Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for
yeah.
everybody listening. And yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Inside Out Health Podcast. I hope it's been helpful to you in your journey. If you think that it might be helpful to someone you know, please share it with them. Please share on social media. It really helps me grow the show and reach more people with these amazing messages. And if you could be so kind as to rate the show and possibly even leave me a review, that really helps. So much thanks in advance if you do that. And yeah, please subscribe if you want to hear more of this type of content. I have lots of amazing expert guests on the way. All right. Thank you.